Have you ever noticed something curious? Someone complains about their iPhone almost every day. The battery isn't great anymore. It's expensive. Some features feel years behind. Yet when it's finally time to buy a new phone, they buy another iPhone. Why? Is it really because the iPhone is objectively better? Or is something much more powerful happening inside the human mind? The answer has less to do with technology than most people think. It's about how your brain makes decisions, protects habits, and avoids uncertainty. And once you understand these psychological forces, you'll start noticing them everywhere, not just in smartphones, but in many of your own daily choices. One of the strongest reasons people rarely switch is something psychologists call the status quo bias. Your brain naturally prefers what already feels familiar. Changing anything, even when the alternative might be better, requires mental effort. Imagine walking the same route to work every morning. One day someone tells you there's a faster road. You might still choose the old one simply because you know every turn. Your brain values certainty more than possibility. The same thing happens with smartphones. An iPhone user already knows where every setting lives. They know how the camera behaves. They know every gesture without thinking. Switching means learning again. That small amount of uncertainty feels larger than it actually is. The brain quietly whispers, "What if I regret changing?" And avoiding that regret often becomes more important than gaining something new. Another powerful force is called loss aversion. Behavioral science consistently shows that people usually feel the pain of losing something more strongly than the pleasure of gaining something of equal value. Think about it. If someone offered you a new phone but told you that you'd permanently lose every photo, note, and habit connected to your current one, most people would hesitate. Even though transferring data is easier than ever, the brain doesn't always evaluate reality. It imagines possible losses. What if my chats disappear? What if my apps don't work the same? What if I miss something important? These thoughts create emotional resistance long before any real problem appears. The interesting part is that this isn't unique to Apple. The same psychological pattern appears with favorite restaurants, old friendships, familiar routines, and even careers. Humans often protect what feels safe, not because it's perfect, because it's known. There's another hidden factor that rarely gets discussed. Your brain builds habits to save energy. Every decision you don't have to consciously think about frees up mental resources for something else. Neuroscientists often describe the brain as an energy-efficient prediction machine. It constantly looks for shortcuts. After years of using one operating system, opening apps, adjusting settings, and replying to notifications become almost automatic. You aren't thinking anymore. You're simply doing. Changing platforms interrupts that automation. Suddenly simple tasks require attention again. The phone hasn't become harder. It just isn't part of your brain's existing map yet. And your brain usually resists rebuilding maps unless there's a very strong reason. There's also a surprisingly social reason. Humans are deeply influenced by identity, sometimes without realizing it. The products we use quietly become part of how we see ourselves. For some people, an iPhone isn't only a device. It represents familiarity, simplicity, creativity, professionalism, or simply belonging to a certain group. Psychologists call this self-identity. When an object becomes connected to your personal identity, changing it can feel emotionally bigger than replacing a tool. It's similar to someone who's worn the same style of clothing for years. Changing clothes doesn't change who they are, but it can briefly feel like it does. That's why conversations about phones often become emotional instead of logical. People aren't only defending technology. Sometimes they're protecting a small piece of their identity. Another psychological force is the ecosystem effect. Not because the ecosystem magically controls people, but because your brain naturally values convenience. Imagine every light switch in your house suddenly moving to different walls. Eventually you'd adapt. But for weeks, every movement would require conscious thought. Apple devices are intentionally designed to reduce those moments. Your phone, watch, tablet, laptop, and wireless earbuds often work together with very little effort. When everything already works smoothly, switching feels like introducing friction into daily life. even if another phone offers impressive features. Your brain compares them against the comfort you already have. Comfort often wins. There's another effect that quietly strengthens the cycle. It's called the sunk cost effect. Once you've invested years learning something, buying accessories, organizing photos, purchasing apps, and building routines, walking away feels surprisingly difficult. Logically, past investments shouldn't determine future decisions. Psychologically, they often do. Your brain doesn't like feeling that previous effort might go unused. So staying feels easier than starting over. But here's something important. None of these psychological forces prove that one phone is objectively better than another. Android devices and iPhones both have strengths and weaknesses depending on what a person values. The science isn't telling us which phone to buy. It's explaining why changing our minds is often harder than changing our devices. So how can you make more objective decisions about technology or anything else? First, ask yourself whether you're protecting convenience or making the best choice for your current needs. Second, separate your identity from the product. Owning something shouldn't define who you are. Third, notice when fear of losing something is louder than excitement about what you could gain. That's often loss aversion speaking. And finally, give yourself permission to question familiar habits occasionally. Familiar isn't always better, but it isn't always worse either. The most fascinating part of psychology is that it reveals something bigger than smartphones. Your brain is constantly choosing between certainty and possibility. Most days, certainty quietly wins. Not because you're irrational, but because your mind evolved to reduce risk, conserve energy, and protect what already works. The next time you see someone buy the same phone again, or notice yourself repeating a familiar choice, pause for just a moment. Ask yourself one simple question. Am I choosing this because it's truly the best option, or because my brain already feels at home?